What's up? Welcome back to my channel, or for the first time if you're new, I'm Sylvan, and today I'm going to be reacting to the rest of the character teasers for Genshin Impact. Going into the Fontaine teasers now, going to be covering all the way up to modern day, being right before Natlan. Feel free to like and subscribe if you enjoy this video, and leave a comment on your thoughts, and I'm just going to get right into it, starting with Lyney, Gloves of Wonder.
People yearn to transcend the mundane world.
Lyney's an interesting start for Fontaine. Given his connection to the House of the Hearth and stuff, it's very fitting for what the overall story ends up being.
Whoa! Amazing! How did you do that?
In the space of a short performance, a magician must shatter the barrier between reality and fantasy, giving the audience a glimpse of the extraordinary.
I like the focus on
this isn't what
the
I ordered.
idea of misdirection and performance and stuff.
You asked for a glass of our finest wine. Maybe you've had enough. Oh, yeah, right. You think I don't know what I ordered? Huh?
There. How about you take another look
I
at
love
your
how
drink?
this is presented as a POV shot.
Yeah, that's the stuff. The sweet smell of apples. What the?
Now I don't fucking know how he does that.
I
Does
swear
that?
I was just holding.
In the eyes of most people, magic tricks are like miracles.
Now this next line here I find very intriguing. I haven't ever been able to fully parse out what it's
But as
trying to mean,
magicians,
but I
we
like
prefer
it.
to think
And the visual of him holding the moon
that
is so
great
good.
miracles are like magic tricks.
Okay. So I'm gonna try to parse out a few things about this now. People yearn to transcend the mundane world. That is a very fair statement. The mundane world, the mundanity of everyday life, is something that people try to escape constantly. It's why things like this game exist. It's to escape to something other than the normal world. And then he continues, that which is mysterious captivates us all. Things that are not immediately clear how they happened, what they mean, how they work, that kind of thing are always going to intrigue people. And then it just sort of leaves that hanging there of establishing that thought. People want to escape the mundane world, and mystery is something captivating. But then it just goes into him doing some magic tricks for some kids. Being like, have you had a good look? The hat's empty. And we visually can see as well that it is empty. We get his first bit of magic with him just sort of quickly moving his hand, and then suddenly the wand is in it. Just an initial bit of magic, and then taps the hat, and the little guy comes out. I don't know what's called, if it even has a name, but his little guy comes out of the hat, and the kids are amazed, because it was empty a moment ago. Classic magician shit. It's just very typical magic stuff with his aesthetic to it. Now, we then move back to him more sort of narrating again, which leads to this interesting back and forth of this teaser, where there's this through line of him narrating about the meaning of mystery and entertainment and performance, with intercutting scenarios where he has used all of his tricks to entertain kids. Later we'll see he's messing with a drunk guy, that kind of thing. And so back into this sort of narration, he says, in the space of a short performance, a magician must shatter the barrier between reality and fantasy. They must convince their audience that what they're doing is truly magical. Not just a trick that they haven't revealed how it is done, but truly magical. And that fundamentally is a pretty high bar to get over, hence the wording of shatter the barrier. You can't just pretend, you have to actively convince the audience and give the audience a glimpse of the extraordinary. Make them think they are seeing something remarkable. To use some wording of later, something like a miracle. And then we go into our next little short scene, this little vignette, with a drunk guy complaining about his order, claiming he ordered cider and having been given wine, and there being a little dispute with the bartender about this. And the bartender can tell and says, you've probably had enough. The drunk guy's just not having it. So to mediate, Lyney gets involved. He snaps his fingers and touches the rim of the glass, and suddenly it's cider, and is like, why don't you take another look, having performed another magic trick. That one is one that is entirely more plausible of how he could have done, because while he was snapping his fingers, he could have been keeping the attention of the drunk guy while replacing the cup or the contents of it or whatever he would have been doing. And it would have been a lot easier because this guy is drunk already. And the guy's like, oh yeah, no, that's what I was wanting. And then we get to the part of how the fuck did Lyney do that? Which is, the guy blinks and he's suddenly holding an apple. Which, I mean, I guess you could chalk it up to him being so drunk that he doesn't notice when Lyney just swaps the item in his hand. But it's so quick and so sort of implausible that I'm chalking this up to another case of them saying it's a magician trick that is literally just impossible. Much like how in the Lyney demo, there's a point where Lynette just pulls a cup out of a card and what the fuck was that? But regardless, it technically might be possible. I just have no fucking clue how he could have done it. Regardless, that adds to the vibe of it being this remarkable, mysterious, extraordinary thing that is fantastical in nature. And then the guy passes out, and we return to the narration, but with the visual of Lyney sitting atop a building. I'm not sure if we can parse out what building this is, but it's one of the taller buildings, I'm pretty sure. I'm not familiar enough with the roof architecture of the various different buildings of Fontaine to know exactly what building or structure this is, but he's on some kind of tall structure. This might even just be like one of the towers that keeps up the various walls and bridges and shit. But regardless, he's up somewhere high. With this, he says, in the eyes of most people, magic tricks are like miracles, which, as I was mentioning before, is that idea of a well-done magic trick will be unclear how it is done and will seem fantastical in nature, just like how I was talking about with the cider becoming an apple. That's the kind of thing that I have no clue how he could have done, so the only answer I could come to was, well, that's just fucking real magic. And that's sort of what he's getting at here. And then we get this really solid shot of the moon as he washes over it and it disappears into dust. And then he opens his hand to reveal the moon in his hand. Once again, this is another case of how the fuck is he doing that? It clearly is some weird thing he can do. He might just have like a little glowing ball that looks like the moon. Whatever the magic trick is, regardless, it's an amazing visual that is great for what he's talking about. And as he's revealing it, he says, in contrast to what most people think of magic tricks, magicians like himself prefer to think the opposite. Not that magic tricks are like miracles, but that great miracles are like magic tricks. Which, having thought about it just in talking about it right now, where I am led by that is the idea of a great miracle, in fact, is something with an explanation behind it. It isn't just some remarkable occurrence. There were pieces in play and moving parts that led up to it being able to happen rather than just utter coincidence and pure happenstance. Which is interesting to me when we get into the fact that later we learn that Lyney is part of the House of the Hearth, he's part of the Fatui, he is a spy, effectively. So in that line of things, we can further interpret this by the fact of he's essentially saying, in all likelihood, that he's had his hand in a good few miracles to set them up to be able to happen, which is very fun to think about. And I feel like it's very in line with his character of him basically being the face of the quote-unquote good side of the Fatui, in the sense of the House of the Hearth being this place that takes people in, him being in many ways brought up as the next father of the house in all likelihood, and it just all lines up really well for this idea that he's had his hand in quite a few pies, he's constructed a good few miracles, and he knows how to hide that fact. And that's where his magician side and his spy side blend together into one, which works really well as a way to express his character. And that's why I feel like this is a really strong teaser, because it simultaneously, visually and aesthetically, is really fun and interesting, and has him saying some fun cryptic things that give us some vibes of his character, but don't give us a lot of concrete details. But when we come back to it with all of the context of the story, suddenly it begins to make a lot more sense of what he's saying and what he's meaning. Or at least it does to me. But with that, we're to the end of the teaser, so we will move on to the next one. Now we have Neuvillette's teaser, Watcher in the Deep. This is a fun one. This was really when the theories about who Neuvillette was, if he was the Hydra Sovereign, that kind of thing, were really picking up. So let's get into it.
Many questions have long perplexed me.
The music is so
neither know
good from
why I was
the
born in
immediate
this
start
form.
point.
Nor do I understand where my long life should take me.
I love the contemplative nature of all of this. The hazy, glowing
It's as
visuals.
if there's something I've forgotten since the very beginning.
Lining up with that line of feeling like he's forgotten something.
So,
Furina's
why
voice
don't you
coming
try to
in, or
find the
perhaps
answer for
Focalor.
yourself?
And then we come into much more concrete detail.
Monsieur Neuvillette, the next trial is about to begin.
Thank you for the reminder.
It's not like you to zone out, Monsieur Neuvillette.
I recalled some things from my past. Events from a very long time ago.
God, I love the moving through the water to the other side.
To me, humanity is like a pool of water in which I see my reflection. Only through
The music
observing
build.
them can I slowly come to understand myself. The court is now in session.
Yeah, I love this one, so I'm gonna go through it again. I love the opening of the shaping of a teardrop or water drop into this little crystal as he begins saying, many questions have long perplexed me. And then we come into that little crystal being on the like brooch or necklace or whatever that he wears. As he's in this sort of hazy, ethereal space of this open field looking through papers, which I actually tie to the idea that he is probably actually in his office looking at these papers, but he's actively reminiscing and questioning these hazy memories of his, and therefore his thought process is in this more ethereal space, this more abstract state. This line was practically confirmation that there was more to him than just being a human or some shit. I love that he doesn't fully understand why he was born in this form, or where his long life should take him. He doesn't understand why he came into the world as he is, or where it will take him, which is very interesting given his role in the entire story as being the judge of Fontaine, both in the literal job description text as well as the one who delivers the final judgment on all of Fontaine to save them. He doesn't know where his long life should take him or why he was born into this form, but by the end of the story, he does, and he accepts it, and he continues forward, banishing the sins of all of Fontaine, which is just a really cool setup payoff between this and the end of the story. I also like that, in line with how I've been describing this as this very hazy, abstract space, this is a big, open, natural space that could be anywhere in Fontaine, realistically speaking, but it is nowhere obviously specific. The mountains aren't inherently distinct, the rocks and trees we see aren't either, and we can't see any clear landmarks either. But there's just these little bits of distinctness, like the butterfly coming off of a plant, and as he turns and the light layers out behind him, he's thinking to himself, in line with those initial two acknowledgments of not knowing about himself, that it feels like he's forgotten something. That there's something in the back of his mind that's itching away at him. He doesn't know the why of anything, and he feels like he should. Which is interesting because when first watching this with the theory in mind that he is the Hydro Sovereign, it sort of implies that he himself doesn't realize he's the Hydro Sovereign, but recognizes that he isn't a normal person. Obviously, we know now through the story that he already knows he is the Hydro Sovereign, so this has to be something much more fundamental to himself that he doesn't remember, or feel like he doesn't remember. He understands he's the Hydro Sovereign reincarnated into a humanoid form, but he doesn't know why, and he doesn't know where that will bring him, and he feels like he should. He feels like he should understand his purpose, but he doesn't fully. And then we have, like I said in the first watch through, Furina or perhaps Focalor speaking to him, saying, "Why don't you find out for yourself?" Which is such a solid line in tandem with the questions he was asking, and where the story leads him, but it also leads me to question, who is saying this? Is it Furina, who, in just some case of her just happening to say the right thing, having heard him ponder these questions at some point, responding saying, "Why don't you find the answer yourself?" Or is it Focalor saying this, as this is effectively the entirety of what she set up for him? Which leads me to think it is much more likely Focalor, because though Furina has her moments of insight, I am much more inclined to think that Focalors is the one who would say this to him. Now, it is entirely possible that in line with this framing of hazy memories and unclear intents, that this is a voice that comes into his mind echoing this thought. It also alternatively could be a much more non-literal, more metaphorical take on it, where this hasn't been specifically said to him, but that's a conclusion he comes to due to the fact that he's being led that way by Focalors in the background. Or it could be this is something that Focalors says, but it never reaches his ears specifically, but because of her conniving and stuff, leads him in that direction anyways. Regardless of the exact nature of it, I feel like it is more in line with Focalors than Furina, but exactly who says it doesn't ultimately matter too much. I just find it interesting to consider. And with that line, we are brought back into reality, essentially, as he's looking into his cup of water. He is pondering still, he's sort of out of it. And his, attendant, secretary, melusine person, I don't know their exact job description, comes up and addresses him and says the next trial is about to begin. Funny thing about that is he's in his office here, very clearly, which means that he is far from the actual trial courtroom, which is just sort of funny to me as a little detail. But hey, he's the Hydro Sovereign. He could get there. Something I absolutely love in his response is just the utter warmth you can feel in his voice and his face as he just thanks her for the reminder. And it's just so clear how much he cares for the Melusines just in this one moment. Now, it, of course, with this alone, isn't obviously clear if this is how he is with all Melusines or just this one, but from what we understand, that is his general take on Melusines in general, is that he cares about them deeply. And clearly this Melusine, which I'm forgetting the name of, unfortunately, is comfortable enough around him to chuckle a little bit and acknowledge that it's not like him to zone out as much as he was. And he openly acknowledges, oh, I was just recalling something from my past, something from a long time ago. Which is interesting, because we were just talking about the fact that he doesn't clearly remember something that he feels like he should, something important. And yet he is thinking back to something a long time ago. Perhaps what we were seeing there was actually a memory of perhaps when he first awoke in his current form, or something along those lines, or just something early on. It might have even been, when he first got his invitation to come into his position as Judge of Fontaine, as that was set up by Focalors. Hence, if he was questioning himself, that would make sense why we hear Furina/Focalors' voice saying, then why don't you find the answer yourself, as it would have presumably been Furina welcoming him in, but it would have been Focalors doing this so that he could get close to humanity, so that he would then understand them enough to come to a conclusion about his own purpose. I like that interpretation. I don't know if it's true or what they're intending, but I like that interpretation myself. And then from there, we get much more esoteric about the visuals and stuff, as we have him on a reflective surface, presumably water, and it goes under the waves and twists the camera to be his reflection, or perhaps we were looking at his reflection and now are looking at him, as he says, to me, humanity is like a pool of water in which I see my reflection, which pairs perfectly with the visual of it passing through the water to the other side of his reflection, and we pass through all of these different versions of himself, extending the metaphor he was using. He acknowledges, only through observing them, observing humanity, can I slowly come to understand myself. As we were talking about earlier, he doesn't understand himself or his purpose yet, so he looks to humanity. He compares himself against them. What parts of himself does he not have that humans do, and what parts does he share? Where is he lacking, where he could be better, and where does he match them or exceed them? Not necessarily exactly in that line of thought, but he's comparing himself against them. He is looking at them as if they are reflecting him. He is looking at humanity in a way that allows them to reflect himself back into his own view, which would allow him to understand himself. Which then, when he says, so I may slowly come to understand myself, we bring him into the throne, effectively. It is technically just his seat in the court, but it is very throne-coded, and is a fun little signifier of the fact that he is the other power in Fontaine other than Furina. and in many ways holds more power than her. And even more so, once he comes to fully understand himself by the end of the story, or at least understand himself more, he is willing to take his spot as effectively the sole ruler of Fontaine. And with that, he looks down at presumably the court and says the court is now in session. He has figured out something about himself, and he will continue to learn more things as the story goes. It's an amazingly concise and introspective look at his character from himself. It doesn't tell us a lot, but we can intuit a lot from it, which I just love. It's actually very in line in a lot of ways with Alhatham's teaser. Feel free to check out my previous video on the teasers to hear what I have to say about that. With that, I'm going to move on to the next one. Now we have Wriothesley's teaser, Indispensable Protocols. I really like this teaser. I'd say between his demo and teaser, though I really like the aesthetic of his teaser, it has a few things that I have like minor issues with, where this I have no issues, no notes, just love it. So let's get into it. I like how it starts in the fortress of
Fontaine's Child Welfare Services has already made all the necessary arrangements.
Immediately sets a strong vibe.
The criminal personally.
I just want to ensure this task isn't left to someone who lacks propriety.
I love how it's this super serious vibe, sort of ominous, and then it goes to this more calm, contemplative, but sort of
Wriothesley,
melancholic
your father's
vibe.
colleague. I'm here with his friend.
Oh, come on.
And I like how it keeps us in mystery of what exactly is happening
Dad's
for
still packing up his
a good
stuff,
chunk of
so you'll
this.
have to give him a minute.
But we can get a clear vibe
That's
that
all right.
it's not all
He has
happy.
a long journey ahead, after all.
All right. Be a good girl and stay out of trouble while I'm away, okay?
I will. Your friend here's super nice. Not like the other guy. He looks scary.
Hey, that's not very polite.
It's quite all right.
I like how he just takes it in stride. He understands he can be a bit scary.
Bye. Come back soon, Daddy. I'll miss you.
I will. Don't worry.
God.
Thank you for extending your sympathy, Your Grace. I thought I wouldn't be able to see her again.
I only sympathize with her.
The switch in his voice
Love
is so
should be
solid.
warm. But to you, it's become a form of punishment. Let's go. Next time you see your daughter, I hope you'll have become a better father.
Such a hard line. God. Yeah, no, I just love this one. So, just gonna acknowledge sort of my favorite things about it and such. So, we get our first hint to what's going on here, saying that Fontaine's Child Welfare Services has already made all the necessary arrangements, and that he doesn't need to escort a criminal personally. So we know there's a criminal involved, and we know there's Child Welfare Services involved. So that alone is enough to piece together some details, can in all likelihood figure out, if you're thinking about it much, that there is some kind of criminal with a kid or something, and that's having to be dealt with because the guy's getting arrested. That's like not too far a stretch, but it doesn't just spell it out for us. And I like how he says that he wants to make sure the task isn't left to someone who lacks propriety, as it gets to sort of the fact that he is very serious about this kind of thing and is fairly intelligent, both from an intellectual and emotional stance. He knows what he's doing quite a bit, and he wants to make sure that nothing goes wrong in the scenario where a kid is involved. And then we come to this point where he's approaching the house, he knocks on the door, kid answers. And he keeps on a kind, respectable face, saying that he's a colleague of her father's, and is with a friend of the father's as well. And the kid's too young to really know exactly who her father's friends are, so she's like, oh, okay, come in. And throughout this, the tragedy of the fact that the kid doesn't fully understand what's going on. She understands that her father is going away for a while, but not at all why. But she's been reassured, obviously, that nothing is wrong, and he'll be coming back at some point in the future. And with the casual sort of acknowledgement of her saying, just so you know, he's still packing up, so he's not quite ready to go. And Wriothesley, keeping on his good face, says that's all right. He has a long journey ahead after all. He isn't outright saying what's going on, but he's just continuing to acknowledge to the kid he's gonna be gone for a while. And he picks up a picture, presumably of the father and the daughter. Not necessarily the case, but I would very much imagine so. Potentially the mother's in the picture as well. Who knows? We get no sign of the mother, but that ultimately doesn't matter much for the context of this teaser. Either way, he's looking at what this family is in all likelihood, that presumably they are a quite happy family. And we see that the father is a very caring person to his daughter who wants to make sure she's okay and is like, please make sure that you stay out of trouble while I'm away, okay? And still not understanding at all, the kid's like, okay, yeah, sure I will, while also just in the same sentence saying, by the way, your friend's super nice, and then straight into, like kids often do, but not like that other guy, he's scary. It's such a kid thing to do, to make immediate judgments on people they meet and not worry about if the person can hear them. And the father tries to correct that and be like, well, that's not very polite, you shouldn't just say things like that. But because of the context of the scenario, completely kind and cordial about it, and is like, that's completely fine, it's quite alright, don't worry about it. And then we get to the leaving of the kid, going with the friend who perhaps is the one who's going to be taking care of her while the father is gone, perhaps it's just leading her to the child services who will then take care of her, whatever it is. As she's just like, bye dad, come home soon, and says that she'll miss him, but it's clearly in like a loving way that she clearly doesn't fully understand how long he's going to be gone, why he's going to be gone, that kind of thing. And the father is able to keep up a strong front while she's watching him, and says that he will, don't worry, he'll be back. But then, presumably, the moment she looks away, he begins to break down. Just can't handle it anymore, and presumably is beginning to cry based on the sounds of it. Now, of course, we can't know exactly what's going through his mind, but based on his next line, where he says, thank you for extending your sympathy, Your Grace, it is fairly clear to me that what is going through his mind is he is simultaneously distraught at the fact that he won't be able to see his daughter for however long it will be, while also being incredibly thankful to Wriothesley for giving him this chance to see her one last time. As he says, he thought he wouldn't be able to see her again. But it's at this point where, though he's been kind and cordial and completely respectable until now, he completely switches now. He's just dealing with, in his eyes, a criminal, so he doesn't have any sympathy for him, just the daughter. He feels bad about making the daughter not have a father in her life for however many years, but he does not fucking care about the criminal themselves. They did a crime, so they are to be punished. And in line with that, he acknowledges that love should be warm, but for him, it's become his form of punishment. Him being locked away in itself is not a true punishment to him. Being away from his daughter is what is a punishment to him, and Wriothesley recognizes this and is completely on board with it. But also, what I take from this is that he is angry that this man was not a better father, that he would do something that would take him away from his daughter. Because in his eyes, he's part of the government, he's part of the whole criminal system, so he has this perspective of that committing a serious crime that could get you arrested and put in jail for a long time, or in this case, the Fortress of Meropide, if you are a father or mother or whatever, if you have people you take care of, and you do those things, you are risking putting your family in a bad position. Whether they are an explicit risk because of your criminal dealings, or just because if you get caught, you won't be able to take care of them. That's what I see here. That he views committing crimes, at the very least, that aren't directly for the purpose of helping family. We don't know about necessarily his opinion on that, but at the very least, committing crimes that don't help those that you have to take care of, he views it as stupid and idiotic because it potentially harms that family that you are supposed to take care of. Or at least that's what I interpret from this. As in line with that, he finishes out the teaser by saying, next time you see your daughter, I hope you'll have become a better father. Because that is the thing here. From what we can see, this guy is a fairly decent father. He cares about his daughter clearly so much that even Wriothesley can tell that being away from her is a form of punishment in itself. So what he means by becoming a better father has to be the fact that in committing a crime, he has put himself in a position where he can't protect his daughter anymore because he's been arrested, which is a very interesting perspective to me. It's not necessarily a deeply flawed one or anything, but it has some interesting wrinkles because I don't know if it is something that I can fully agree with. I feel like you have to get into the intent of whatever crimes are being committed, the scale of the crimes, that kind of thing, to really say if him committing whatever crime he did results in him being a bad father. Regardless, that's a whole conversation that is pure speculation, so I won't get any further into it, and I'll leave it there, because I believe that is all that is said. Yeah, so I'm going to move on to the next one. Now then, now we get to Furina's character teaser, member of the cast. This teaser was the first nail in the coffin for me for pulling for Furina and deciding that she is one of my favorite characters in the entire game, both gameplay and story-wise. The other nail in the coffin was her demo, and then the final nail in the coffin was just how fun and good she was to play. So, you know, there's all that, but let's see what about this teaser drew me in so much. I love the static and the grain of everything from the start here.
Opera walks the line between truth and fiction.
We get her narrating what's going on.
For though the story is fictional, as far as the characters are concerned, their fate is real.
I'm gonna get to that line a lot more later, because I feel like that's the core of pretty much all of this. They deal with perspective really interestingly throughout all of this.
Or characters on the stage? Nobody can know for sure. After all, nothing is easier to fool than the senses.
The entire
We know
vibe of
only
this is
one
so
thing
perfect.
For certain, that the prophecy is true. Because in this show, the prophecy is a part of all characters' fates.
Yeah.
Don't believe me? So, you still haven't noticed that I'm not even speaking to you. This is just a recording playing in your head.
The switch up is so good.
Now, do you see? The prophecy has come true, and everything has been lost to the Great Flood. And you are the only one I have left.
The switch in her voice there. It's so fucking good. As
And
it just
so,
begins to break.
while fate may seem like it's playing cruel jokes on you, only fate will not deceive you. Unless you can first deceive fate itself.
Yeah, it's so good. I think this is my favorite teaser of this bunch. Like I said, I really love the film grain and the static as we start, giving that vibe of this being a recording, which we then get confirmed at the end, as we get this narration from Furina saying opera walks the line between truth and fiction, which is an idea that is very, very close to what Lyney was talking about with magic tricks and miracles and fantasy and reality being blended. But what I find interesting is where in Lyney's teaser, it can be much more interpreted in this idea of what I was saying, where you have to actively trick the audience into thinking it is something fantastical, where it is actually something more mundane, and that miracles and magic tricks have a lot in common because there's a lot of strings in the background orchestrating these kinds of things to happen for both, that kind of thing. This is a different angle. This is talking about the fact that opera is a blend of truth and fiction, because though the story is fictional, though the audience watching it knows it's fictional, as far as the characters are concerned, the people on the stage, the people that the story is about, their fate is real. Which gets into sort of a bit of a Matrixy idea of the thought that if we are all players on a stage, we believe our fate is real, but to whoever is watching us, this is just a story. This is just something playing out, which my immediate thought is this is a direct comparison point to the world of Teyvat and the people within it versus Celestia. Celestia is watching down onto the world from a distance, letting things play out, correcting things where needed be, making sure the story is going in the right directions. But to everyone on the ground, they're just living their lives. They don't understand that this is a fictional story, something that is being orchestrated. They believe that everything that is happening to them is real and non-orchestrated and is just the way of life. Or at least most of them do. Which, of course, gets into some of those weirder theories of the idea that everything is an illusion, the entire world is just a weird Matrix bubble in Irminsul or whatever the fuck. That might be what this is getting at, but I think there is things much more closely tied to the story of Fontaine we can get into with the thoughts of Celestia being the audience/directors of the opera of the world. And I feel this is very much implied by the fact that with no real transition point between what she was just saying and what she now is saying, she says, "There lies the rub," which just fun way of phrasing. Are you and I the audience? The people who are watching a fictional story play out? Or characters on the stage? The people whose fates are sealed and are just playing out in front of whoever else is watching. No one can know for sure, she acknowledges. After all, nothing is easier to fool than the senses. Which is our second sign alongside the initial film grain and static that things aren't all they seem to be here, that she isn't just talking to us or narrating ambiguously. This is a recording playing within a robot, and it's shown beautifully with her stepping forward and reaching out to touch basically the perspective, but for it then to be revealed that actually we are effectively her POV looking into a mirror that we didn't realize was there before until she touches it and it cracks, which is just great visuals. And in line with what was being said earlier, it gets this cool double meaning thing of the sense that whoever is pulling the strings of the world, if they truly are just characters on the stage, is fooling everybody, is making sure that everyone thinks what they're doing is real and not manufactured, and that nothing is wrong, they can just keep living their lives, when in reality they're just being fooled. But also, on the other hand, this is one of our first hints to Fosler's big conspiracy, in the sense that nothing is easier to fool than the senses. If Celestia is looking down at the world in whatever way they do, and declares that this is how fate must play out, XYZ must happen, this is the prophecy, then Fosler understands, okay, then we just need to make Celestia believe that that is what happened. We need to fool them by fooling their senses, what they see. Because the way things play out is clearly more in a metaphysical trick than anything, but regardless, I see this as sort of our first hint towards that. And with that, it once again switches into something that isn't immediately tied on the surface level to what she was just saying, but when we break it down like this, is so directly connected with her going into saying, we know only one thing for certain, that the prophecy is true. That is the fate of the characters on this stage. And the reason she gives for knowing that it is true is because in this show, the show of the Fontaine, the prophecy is a part of all characters' fates. And we also then visually get a really cool shot, which is our third hint towards this being the perspective of a weird robot, is taking a lens off of a camera, which is our perspective, and seemingly talking to someone or responding to someone, which we know is nobody. She says, "Oh, you don't believe me? You don't believe that the prophecy is true and all of our fates are tied to it and this is all just a big show?" Well, that just means that you haven't realized the situation. You haven't realized I'm not even speaking, which is a fun thing because she has never visually spoken in this entire teaser. It's just her voice as she's going around doing things, and she says, "This is just a recording playing in your head," revealing the first piece of this teaser's deception. Our senses had been fooled into thinking we were in a perspective shot of someone talking to Furina, perhaps, or just a more omnipresent view, but we are actually that of a automaton that is just recording this. And then it switches to her being underwater, some air escaping her mouth. As her smile goes away, she looks around. She smiles a little bit again as she says, "The prophecy has come true, and everything has been lost in the Great Flood." And this leads me to something I find very interesting about this teaser, which is these lines and these visuals at the latter portion of this is very interesting to me because it can't really have ever happened, which is very interesting. Because what is the circumstance required for this to happen? As she says, the prophecy has to have come true and everything has to have been lost in the Great Flood. Now, of course, from her perspective in the story, this could have hypothetically happened in that time between the flooding and her realizing that everyone is safe and alive. But as far as we can tell from the story itself, she never moved out of the chair she was in crying. So this couldn't have really happened. And also, it's not like things flooded for a super long time. So unless more time passed in that flood than was obvious, this couldn't have happened. Or at the very least, if it did happen, it was off screen in the midst of everything else fucking happening, and it's just her at the peak of her despair, effectively. But I get the vibe that this is a more ethereal, not having actually happened thing of this is what would have happened if Fosler's scheme was not real, if it hadn't occurred, or rather if it had failed. And something I love is as she says that everything has been lost and the entire vibe of things is breaking apart, her voice is still solid when she's saying that. Her voice does shift, but she is still holding strong in that moment. As she then comes closer wordlessly, not exactly clear what she's doing until we shift perspectives to be a more omnipresent view, as she says, "And you are the only one I have left." Nothing but a docile automaton in the bottom of the ocean. Nothing else. She's just left there weeping on her throne, as the prophecy says. And it's only in that line where her voice breaks, truly. She continues speaking a little bit, and it is rougher than it has been for the rest of the teaser, but it even then recovers a little bit. It's at that line, though, where she can't hold it back. But then this is where we get this hinting towards this not being what really is happening or will happen. This is what should be happening. This is what the script says. But while fate seems like it may be playing cruel jokes on you, only fate will not deceive you. You get what you see from fate. It tells you a prophecy that everything will be taken in the flood, and everyone will be washed away, and nothing will be left but Furina crying on her throne. That's what you'll get. It won't deceive you, unless... And that's where all of this turns into this water droplet encapsulating this entire scenario, and it becomes a teardrop. As she's crying in her sleep, presumably, she says that though fate will not deceive you, if you can first deceive fate itself, then fate will deceive you. Fate on its own will play it straight. It will do as it says. Things will be all washed away. But if someone else steps behind the curtain and begins pulling the strings that wasn't one of the original controllers of fate, if one of the players on the stage can get to the script and rewrite it, but in a way that the original scriptwriter never notices, well then everything's going to be different. Fate will deceive you because it thinks that what it wrote out will be the case, but it's wrong because it's been deceived. And that's exactly what Focalors did, which is so perfect for this to be something that she says in this weird, half-awake, half-asleep, crying state that she is in here, as she doesn't necessarily fully understand what's going to happen. She's contemplating what's going to go on if she's just a player on the stage trapped by fate who has no way of stopping this prophecy, or if perhaps there's a way to get around it. And Focalors exists as that other half who says, I'm already working on it. I've been doing this for 500 years, and this will work out. I have deceived fate, as she put all the pieces in play so that, in the case of her story, every checkmark will be checked. The sins of Fontaine's people will be washed away, and Hydro Archon will be left crying on her throne underneath the waves. But the people won't disappear with their sin. With the death of the Hydro Archon, the power can return to the Hydro Sovereign, and he then has the power to do what the Hydro Archon prior to Focalors wasn't, and grant true humanity to the people of Fontaine, washing away their sin in the waters of the flood, while keeping them alive, stay around after. All the boxes have been checked, with just the slight wrinkle of the people still being around. Fate thinks that everything is in order, but the people of Fontaine don't need to suffer for it. Fate has been deceived, therefore the prophecy that fate gave you is wrong, so it has deceived you as well, but in this case, in the best way possible. That is what I get from this. And with that interpretation, it serves as a masterful teasing of the much more serious sides of Furina's character, because we really didn't see much of it prior to now. The most we got was her begging for her life when she's accosted by Arlecchino, but other than that, we don't get anything more than like the little hints that maybe there's something more going on. Maybe she isn't really the Hydro Archon. Maybe she doesn't know what she's doing, but we don't truly get this side of her until the end of the story. So this was our first tease of it, and it's the first tease of what Focalors' plot is, deceiving fate itself to save everyone. And I fucking love it for that. It's just so good. It strikes at the perfect pieces of what makes Furina and the overall story of Fontaine so good as a character and storyline. And it feels like a through line that is going to be continuing on into Natlan, it seems, with these ideas of fighting against fate, where Focalors goes with this route of deceiving fate, working behind the scenes to trick fate itself. It seems like perhaps Wavika is going to be just fighting against it, perhaps. but we don't know for sure there. That's pure speculation, and that's beyond the scope of this teaser, so I'm going to move on to the next one. Now then, with Furina's teaser done, moving on to Navia's teaser, we are beyond the scope of the storyline of Fontaine and into the post-story, basically, as we'll be able to see in this teaser, as it doesn't get into the Navia bits that are in the main story, but more so what she is like after the fact. So, let's get started. It's Navia by special invitation. I really like the presentation of this one. It's very simple. It's one of the more simple ones of
This invitation
Fontaine.
is yet to be sent. He doesn't have a fixed residence, so addressing the letter has proved problematic.
It's way too extra the way she flips that
Don't
letter.
worry, I'll deliver it. If you find the target, report to me.
Yes, mademoiselle.
I like how we can already hear how more upbeat her voice is, which is a cool thing. I'll get into that more on the more thorough look through. I like the comic panel-y vibe of this.
Oh.
And it's here revealed that who she was looking for was the Traveler.
Special delivery squad.
I love that she just jumps off the building and glides down with her umbrella.
What would a banquet celebrating Poisson's reconstruction be without you?
I find it interesting that they actually just outright
partner.
acknowledge the
Let's
reconstruction
go.
of Poisson being essentially a spoiler. But yeah, no, it's a fun one. It's a much more simple one. It doesn't have nearly as much to get into on a grand plot scale, but I like it nonetheless. I like the overall framing of this, of the attempts to get this letter to its recipient, despite them being someone who doesn't have anywhere to receive letters from. The best you can do is bring it to the Adventuring Guild, but regardless, it's a fun framing. And I like how it's not immediately obvious who they're talking about. It can be intuited, but because they specifically say he, we don't know if they're talking about the Traveler, because more often than not, they try to keep that ambiguous. But regardless, I like how she is like, okay, so it'll be a bit problematic to get the letter to him, but don't worry, she'll deliver it. It gets to the fact that she, as a leader of Spina di Rosula, is a very hands-on person. She gets into the weeds with things. She doesn't just tell people to do things and then sit in her chair back at base or whatever. She begins the search herself and directs everyone that if they find the target, report to her. Something about him wearing sunglasses as he looks through the little telescope thing is really funny to me. I don't know why. And it's here that we begin to get the more comic panel-y aesthetic here, which I think is just fun, as it pops in with her going to the Adventurers Guild to ask if they've been seen, clearly getting a not clear answer. She's asking around as her guys are just being ridiculous as usual. And then we get the last one of them on the rooftops looking around. This guy being not careful enough and almost falling, but she manages to catch him. And then it punches into her specifically as she sort of sighs, but then she looks out and notices that's them. And then we get her POV shot seeing the Traveler and Paimon as we look up and go, oh, hey, Navia. Wait, what the fuck? Why is she jumping off a building? As she just says, hey, Spina di Rosula Special Delivery Squad, mission accomplished. As all the birds are freaking out as a woman is falling from the skies. Which I just love because it also just shows how reckless she can be at times. She just doesn't have a care in the world at this moment as she's achieved her mission, and everything's just perfect in that moment. And then we shift perspectives to the Traveler, as I mentioned, as she says, what would a banquet celebrating Poisson's reconstruction be without you? Directly acknowledging the end of the story with the fact that Poisson was destroyed during one of the first, preemptive floods, and that she wants the Traveler to be there, given how much they mean to Poisson and Navia specifically, given everything that happened in the story. Which is just cute. I love it. And I like the two guys posing, pushing up their glasses a little bit. It's fun, but it just makes me think, when mentioned in line with the reconstruction of Poisson, that they aren't Malus and Silver, which is so tragic. But regardless, I love that she calls the Traveler partner. It's real cute, and that's where it ends. Like I said, real simple, but real cute. And a lot of little tidbits there that I find fun. But not much else for me to say, so I'm going to move on to the next one. Now we move on to the obligatory leeway character, in this case, Xianyun's teaser, Discernment and Ingenuity. I haven't seen this one much. I really only watched it like once or twice, so I'm curious to see what I remember from this and what I've forgotten. So let's just get right into it.
Huh? A story about Master?
Oh
Let me
yeah,
think.
that's how this is framed.
Master's a great inventor. When I was a child, she made all kinds of toys for me.
I like it being framed from the perspective of the people that Cloud Retainer raised. I love that even as a kid, Ganyu was all serious and wasn't going
They
to
were often too advanced for me,
ask for things, but
but they always showed me how much she cared.
fucking adorable.
Huh. You want to hear a story about Master? Master might say she likes peace and quiet, but she doesn't mind getting visitors on Mount Outsong. In truth, she does get lonely if no one ever goes to see her.
Cloud Retainer, you say?
And then we shift to someone else
Yes, I
that
know
is
a
very
tale
close
or
to
two.
her.
There was a time when she preferred to appear in human form, and was revered as a bold and decisive figure.
Really? Aw, we've never seen her in that form before.
And then we just get the classic trope.
Who speaks about one behind one's back?
Not to worry. I'm sure you will have the chance to very soon.
Yeah. This one's cute. I forgot how just sort of nice this one is. It's got a lot of little details, and I find it fun that Xianyun literally only has one line in this. It's everyone else talking about her, which for some characters I feel like could be a bad move, but for her it works because she's very much the kind of person to talk about others, but not much about herself outside of her achievements. So it's good to get these stories from other people. And I like how it's a through line through the entire thing of we get this 1, 2, 3 structure of 3 different stories about her, from essentially her 2 kids, and then essentially her former boss. And starting with Ganyu, she thinks for a moment, has a little bird thing from, presumably, Xianyun, and what she lands on to tell a story about is the fact that she's a great inventor, and how when she was a child, she'd make all kinds of toys for her. Not buy, but make. And visually, we get this great little scene that has Cloud Retainer moving through town with Ganyu as a kid. Kid Ganyu is fucking adorable, as she looks at these little pinwheels and just sort of gets enamored with them for a moment, clearly wants one, but then she sort of shakes it off and is like, nope, don't need it, which is just a little cute detail about her, that she's always been this sort of straight-laced, serious, focused on the task ahead type person, but Cloud Retainer takes note that she wanted one, and she thinks about it. And in line with Cloud Retainer, I wouldn't be surprised if, in her mind, it wasn't, oh, I won't buy one, I'll just make one, that'll be easier. I think much more likely her thought process is, why would I buy one when I could make something better? I feel like that's more in line with what she would think. And in line with that, we get Ganyu continuing the story saying, they were often too advanced for me, as we get this whole mechanism thing that has like 3 big pinwheels that are effectively fans that are just blowing her hair back and stuff. But she's able to acknowledge the fact that they always showed how much she cared. And smug Cloud Retainer in the background like, yep, I did it. I made something better than those simple pinwheels, is just really fun. And then we shift to the next one. We shift to Shenhe, which, first off, little side thing about Shenhe, I love that we catch her while she's eating just a plate of food, in the sense that this ties into her at the beginning of the Archon quest that we meet her. She's coming off of having tasted a ton of dishes because she felt that she wanted to taste them, but wasn't going to let herself, like, revel in them too much because she didn't think she was going to be part of the world where that food came from, and she was tempted enough by it to taste them, but still was blocking herself off from all of that. But now we see she's just in town eating a big old plate of food, and I just like that as a little through line of her character, of she's letting herself indulge in things a little bit now. I like seeing Shenhe treating herself to some good food. It's just something I like. But as she, like Ganyu, is like, oh, you're asking about Master, a story about her? Okay. And goes straight into a story saying she might say she likes peace and quiet, but she doesn't mind getting visitors on the mountain. And she does get lonely. And in part of this, I find it a very funny little tidbit here that she's pouring a bucket of water and fish into the pond up on the mountain, which then, when you tie it with the fact that we're up there fishing and the fact that I'm pretty sure in-game there is a fishing spot there, it implies a funny thing that she carries buckets of fish up to the pond, so there will be fish in there that we can fish, so that we'll have a reason to come up to the mountain, which is in line with what Shenhe's saying, just really cute and fun, and I like it. But then we move to the last story from Zhongli, and he just sort of chuckles and is like, yeah, I know a tale or two, as he gives us a more intriguing insight into her, saying that there was a time when she preferred to be in human form, and was revered as a bold and decisive figure. Immediately Paimon's like, oh, come on, we didn't ever see her like that. And then we jump to her in the modern day, in humanoid form, tinkering with some parts, presumably because it's a lot easier to build things with human hands rather than wings, but regardless, she might just on a whim have decided to be in this form. Either way, though, she is doing it, and then she sneezes with the classic anime trope of, oh, someone's talking about me, I sneeze. And she comments on that, just sort of going, and pushing up her glasses as she says, who speaks about one behind one's back? That sort of self-righteous vibe that she gets is very similar to the Eula thing in her teaser, which is just sort of fun. And then we get the final line from Zhongli saying, I'm sure you'll have the chance very soon. Which is just very fun, given that this came out right before the new version came out, when we were going to be able to actually see her like that. Which is cool, I like it. Very straightforward, gives a couple insights to her character, but nothing much, I'd say. But overall, I like it quite a bit. Don't have too much more to say about it, though, so I'm going to move on to the next one. Now we turn to Fontaine with Chiori's teaser, Crimson Woven Heart. Let's get into it.
Hello? Is someone gonna tailor my suit?
What were you thinking? Why would you keep a Tenryou commission official waiting?
I like that we start in Inazuma, actually.
Last in line.
Foolish girl. You are no apprentice of mine!
This really does give an interesting layer to her character.
Did you hear me?
Hey, it's first come, first served. This wedding dress needs to be ready for fitting by nightfall. Eloth, raise the waist a little higher to accentuate her figure. And the sleeves need shortening. I'll fetch the material.
Got it.
I knew it. That dress is for Letitia, isn't it? Always dreamed of wearing a Chiori wedding dress. Aww. So some poor girl's dumb dream is more important than my business dinner? Huh?
I love how fucking pompous this guy is.
Oh my, so sorry. I was looking for my fabric shears. Those were the wrong ones.
This was an expensive suit.
Oops. Oh, not those ones either.
I love her attitude.
What are you gonna do?
What do you mean? I thought you wanted your suit tailored.
Chiori, who'd you throw out this time?
What are you saying? I did nothing. This one jumped out all by himself. He better pay me for the window.
This can't happen again.
You're right. Next time I'll lock the windows too.
God, honestly, I don't know if I ever saw this. I was realizing just mid-watching it, I don't know if I ever actually saw this, because I don't remember this. So let's go through and analyze it then, with, I guess, my first impressions. So, I love how pompous this guy is, like I said, how abrasive he is. And he's like, aren't you gonna tailor my suit? We don't immediately know the context of what he's talking about, other than obviously tailoring his suit, but we don't know why he's annoyed or thinks he should be immediately getting his suit tailored or whatever. But we get this flashback to Chiori as a child, in Inazuma, where she presumably was learning her practice of like weaving or clothing design or whatever, as clearly her master in the trade or whatever is scolding her, saying, what were you thinking? Why would you keep a Tenryou Commission official waiting? And she tries to retort very sheepishly, saying, but he was last in line, and her master is just completely not having it, saying that she's a foolish girl, saying that she's no apprentice of hers. Honestly, might have been a breaking point in her apprenticeship, who knows? But it leads to this interesting concept that in Inazuma, or at the very least in the line of work of clothing making, you do not keep someone important waiting even if they are the last in line. It is not first come, first served. It is the most important person gets treatment first. And that is something that clearly did not line up with Chiori's view of things. Probably one of the reasons she left Inazuma. And that returns us to this scenario now, where she's in a similar position. Clearly, this is an important person, or someone who believes themselves to be important, who is being forced to wait because, as she says in a moment here, it's first come, first served in her business. She may not have been able to do that back in Inazuma, where the rules are different, but when she's making the rules, she makes it fair. Whoever comes first is the first person that she brings to priority, and she acknowledges that the wedding dress needs to be fitted by nightfall. And then she goes on to just acknowledge the pieces of the dress that need reworking and adjustment. And her assistant is just completely in line with this, is not retorting against anything, is just working alongside her. At this point, essentially disregarding the guy. And now, thinking he's got figured out, this pompous guy is like, clearly thinks he's put something together, as he seemingly knows the person who the dress is for. Clearly mocking how she always wanted to wear a wedding dress made by Chiori Boutique. And from the looks of things, he tampers with the dress in some way, which he's just being an asshole at this point. And we can see that even more with him being like, what's more important than my business dinner? He's literally saying, my business dinner is more important than a woman's wedding. Which, what the fuck? It just does a great job of painting him as a total asshole that we don't care about what happens to, but is also very much the kind of thing that real assholes are like. There are people like this. And he even grabs the assistant, which Chiori has none of. She literally fucking throws some shears at him, and I think cuts his outfit in some way or something. And she just plays it off of being like, oh, sorry, those weren't the ones I needed, so I just decided to idly throw the shears in your general direction. My bad. And he begins to go off again, saying this is an expensive suit, but he gets cut off because she throws another one at him, this time cutting off a bit of the suit fully. And she just continues mocking him, going, oh, not those either, sorry. At this point, he's not being abrasive and aggressive, he's being a little bit more fearful and reluctant. And she's just continuing to play up the act, being like, what do you mean? I thought you just wanted your suit tailored. As she pats him on the shoulder and pulls out her scissors, concerningly close to his throat, I might add. And then we hear glass breaking, and we cut to Chevreuse in the aftermath, watching a shard of glass fall off of the broken window. And what I love about this is the various implications that this kind of thing has happened before. She is prone to throwing assholes through windows. And I love how, though she is annoyed, Chevreuse is clearly not going to actually do anything to Chiori about this. She's not going to arrest her for assaulting this guy or anything. And I honestly can't tell if in this next line Chiori is telling the truth or not, that she did nothing, because I very much could see in that level of fight or flight that guy might have been in that moment, that he might have decided to jump out the window. But given how she's been acting this entire teaser, it is also equally as likely that she did just throw him out and is continuing to pretend that she's done nothing. The part of me that makes me think that she might be telling the truth, though, is the fact of her saying, he better pay me for the window. But it could be her just being very playful about this and pretending that she has nothing to do with what happened, and that it's actually his fault, and that, in fact, he should pay her for the damages. Either way, it's fun, and Chevreuse just isn't buying in, just says, listen, this can't happen again. You can't keep throwing people through windows. And she's like, yeah, all right, I'll lock the windows too this time. As if that would stop them being thrown through them, like what is happening. Which I just find very fun as a ending line. It paints Chiori's character perfectly. I think that's what I can say about this is a really simple scenario that shows her character immaculately. She is someone who does not take any bullshit, no matter how important you are as a person. She will do things her way, regardless of what other people think. And as we see in her demo and just overall, that has brought a lot of people to her and raised her fame up drastically, while also resulting in her having a lot of enemies, which I just think is cool for a character. But other than that, don't have too much more to say about the teaser, so I will move on to the next one. Now we have Arlecchino's teaser, Sleep in Peace. This is one of my favorites. If Furina's teaser is my favorite from a lore standpoint and hinting towards the future, this is my favorite from just a pure character standpoint, I think, as it really added wrinkles to Arlecchino's character in ways that we weren't necessarily expecting when we got this. It had a lot of things we were expecting, as well as some other things that we only really got into once we learned more about her. So with that, let's just get right into it. I love how immediately different the energy of this teaser is from the start.
I was reckless.
It just feels so much darker than pretty much anything else.
Those poor children. The futile hope in their eyes.
I've told you before. Recklessness.
And I find it
always
really
leads to
interesting
failure.
how harsh
But it
and
was not
strong her
wholly
voice
in
is,
vain.
even when she's
I
reassuring
shall settle
someone.
the rest.
Ah, those fools. They will never know the
And I love
wonders
how
of
quickly
wealth.
we can write this guy off as a fucking asshole who deserves to be stepped on. And they waste no time here. And with that, I think we have I'm pretty sure the only death of someone in a teaser. I don't think there's anyone who dies in teasers other than this, and I also think it's one of the only times we see blood as well.
I have acquired some new funds.
I love the implications of this.
Okay.
Mission accomplished. You can sleep now.
Thank you. Once I'm better, I'll start my next mission.
God. I love how the energy shifts here. No longer just this dark,
Those
ominous
who
feel,
parade their virtues
but this
often do the
deeply
most
sad one.
evil. We are not like them.
And that line,
Rest in peace.
that line is so
Mujevna.
important to her character. I'll get
My
into it
child.
more in a moment. Alright, going through it. So we start in presumably a part of the House of the Hearth, but it's not entirely clear, at the bedside table of one of her children, who has clearly been severely injured. And she says she's sorry, that she was reckless, but that she couldn't help it. When she saw those emaciated patients, the poor children, she couldn't help herself. She needed to do something. And Arlecchino practically scolds her at first, saying, I've told you before, recklessness always leads to failure. But then she moves into more reassuring, saying that it was not wholly in vain, and that she shall settle the rest. She is a harsh and, if you're to believe her words, uncaring father, but she still reassures that she will finish what her child has started. And then here we get a little bit of just quick lore on this guy, saying that he's a philanthropic savior of the poor, which then is immediately contradicted by him calling all of the poor people fools that will never know the wonders of wealth. And based on what is implied with the immediately previous bits, we can gather that this guy presumably is using children for human experiments or something like that. Whatever that is, we don't fucking know, but it's terrible. And they do an incredible job of making us hate the guy immediately, as suddenly Arlecchino appears in the window or the door or whatever. And this guy is immediately surprised as she calmly walks in, arms crossed. He becomes terrified quickly as she just grabs him by the throat and lifts him up, looks him in the eye, hold, throws him to the ground, plants her foot on his skull, and looks down at him. Completely unclear what she is thinking. Clearly isn't kindness or mercy, as she flicks her hand and stomps down with her heel. And though the sound itself is a more muffled, blunt sound, if she really stomped down with her heel, that guy's skull isn't real anymore. And it's made very clear quickly here that that guy is fucking dead. As she is walking down this bright hall, it's the brightest anything has been since the beginning of the teaser, runs into a younger Furina who gets worried because he sees the blood on her face. We don't see the blood yet, but he does. And not even acknowledging it, she just says, "We can take in a few more homeless children next year. I've acquired some more funds." And then begins to walk on. At which point, knowing the deal, Furina just shuts up and goes, "Oh, okay, all right." And then we get the perspective of the dying girl. And once she's awake, we can, through her perspective, see that it's close enough to when the kill happened that Arlecchino hasn't even washed her face of the blood. And she just calmly says, "Mission accomplished," and that she can sleep now. And to her perspective, and what could be interpreted, she is saying, you can rest and recover, just don't worry about anything, everything's been settled, rest up now. But much more realistically, Arlecchino understands that she is not going to live long, and this child of hers is going to die in any moment, and so she reassures her that everything is settled and you can relax and go peacefully. But that's not immediately what her child understands. She says thank you, but then says that she'll start her next mission once she's better. And no sooner than when she's done with that sentence does the light fade from her eyes and she is dead. And with how Arlecchino reacts, she closes her dead child's eyes and doesn't say a word. It's clear that she has hardened herself for this kind of thing before, which we know through her entire story, and then it fades out and then back into her at the graveyard, leaving at a grave a handful of rings, presumably from the guy, and a report that his body has been found, and that all of his scandalous exploits were revealed, and that his immense wealth vanished without a trace. I wonder where that went. And then we get, in my mind, the most important lines of this teaser that encapsulate almost everything of who Arlecchino as a person is and her view on the world, and just pretty much, just the world itself. Those who parade their virtues often do the most evil, but we are not like them. As the rain is coming down, dripping off of her hair and face, in a way that could almost be tears, but never in a way that directly would hide any, so we know that she isn't actually crying. She affirms that we are not like them. Not that she isn't, but we. The House of the Hearth is different. We do not parade our virtues. We do not deny the wrongdoings we have done. But that means we are not the worst of them. That means that we have some ground to stand on. I'll get into that a little bit more, but to add to it, she then says rest in peace to her dead daughter. And it's with these lines that we get the most warmth and sorrow out of her that we pretty much ever will. At this point in her life, that is the most she can manage. The most that she'll allow herself to let out. And when in consideration with everything else about her character, that is the way I see what she was saying of that we are not like them. The worst people in the world parade their virtues and hide their wrongdoings. She understands that she has done horrible things, that she has killed, that she has fought, she has murdered those who cared about her in equal number as she has people that deserved to die. And yet she does not deny this. She does not ever put up a front. We see this in her story quest. When things begin to get revealed to the player and the rest of the House of the Hearth, that it seems like she's just executed people, basically, for going against the House of the Hearth. She doesn't deny it. She acknowledges she's killed plenty of people from the house, and even if some of those things aren't true, she doesn't bother denying them. She understands that her personal morality is too far gone to consider herself a good person or try to save her own reputation, but she holds on to that fact that she is better than what came before and what surrounds her. She is not like those who parade their virtues. she does not pretend to be a good person. She just does what she will, and lets those who learn about it decide what they think of her. She will not claim to be better than others in any moral way, except for those who do that very thing, which is just really interesting to me and I absolutely love about her character. And though it doesn't encapsulate everything about her, it is a perfect through line, I would say. And it encapsulates her dark morality, her very gray nature, in a very interesting way. And one thought that comes to mind to me is, when she says this, does she include the rest of the Fatui or just the House of the Hearth? When she says, we are not like them. And furthermore, when she says, those who do the worst things parade their virtues, when she says that, is she implying the rest of the Fatui are like that as well? As if we look to the Fatui's actions in a grand scale, they speak of grand goals, of overthrowing the gods, reclaiming the world for humanity in the name of the Tsaritsa. But how do they go about that? Assassinations, toppling governments, destabilizing entire cultures. That's not good things. That is not what a good person does. That is not what a virtuous person does. So I ask the question, when she says we are not like them, is she just saying we are not like these random people, like this supposedly philanthropic guy who is actually doing horrible things? Or is she saying the House of the Hearth is better than the rest of the Fatui, as we do not hide what we do behind claims of virtuous goals? We just do what is necessary, nothing more. That is the question I ask. And I don't have an answer to it, but I feel like by the end of the Snezhnaya storyline, we will have that answer of if that is what she is saying, and I can't wait to find out. But with that, that's just about it for this teaser, so I'm going to move on to the next one. Now we move on to Clorinde's character teaser, Final Failsafe. At this point, we are into the ones that I've made other videos on. Feel free to check those out if you're interested. Because I've already checked them out in a video, I'll probably be a bit more brief in these, just pointing out some things that I didn't before, or emphasizing some things further, that kind of thing, but let's go through it.
Some say that champion duelists are to Fontaine as the safety is to a musket. Which is to say, a chance to defend one's honor and avoid the scrutiny of the prosecution. A way to unload the pent-up emotion in the courtroom without a violent eruption.
I really like the vibe of this one.
Way of looking at it.
It's definitely not my favorite teaser, but I quite enjoy seeing essentially Clorinde in her prepping phase before a duel.
And as a last resort, we will do so by force.
In that case, Mr. Mescal, please confirm whether I understand the defense's position correctly. You vehemently oppose the law, refuse
I find
to stand trial,
it so funny how much of an idiot this guy
to
is.
defend the honor of your guild.
That's right. I demand a duel.
To office.
Such a fucking
it is
idiot.
Only when the safety is disengaged and the champion duelist takes aim.
The music is fucking incredible here.
Whose hand controls the gun?
The request for a duel is approved. This decision is irreversible.
Alright, gonna just do a real quick look through of it to point out a couple things. So like I said, I really like how the entire first half of this is essentially her preparing for a duel. Seeing how she prepares herself for that kind of thing is cool. And she, while doing so, is narrating over comparing herself to the safety on a musket, or rather saying that some people in Fontaine do, which she elaborates to say that it is a chance to defend one's honor and avoid the scrutiny of the prosecution. That alone, I'm not entirely sure where the comparison point comes in, but let's continue. As she says, it's a way to unload the pent-up emotion in the courtroom. So, yeah, I don't really get it. I don't really get the comparison point, as the safety on a musket is something that protects a gun from being fired. You can pull the trigger, but nothing will happen, which The most I can take out of this is the idea that with this line of a way to unload the pent-up emotion in the courtroom is that a duel with the champion duelist is a way to release that emotion, that pent-up emotion in the courtroom, to calm things and resolve things, similar to the way that I guess someone pulling the trigger on a gun when they're angry can release pent-up emotion, so if the safety's on, it's a safe way to do that? I don't fucking know. I don't really get this bit. Feel free to let me know what I'm missing here in the comments. But then she continues saying there's another way of looking at it. Namely, when the accused denigrate the law and question its authority, we must safeguard the dignity of the court, and as a last resort, we will do so by force. Clorinde, the champion duelist, is that last resort of force. If people question the court, if they believe that the laws are worthless or wrong, and that they deserve to avoid any punishment for whatever it is they have done, then fine, let's fight it out. Let's see if you are stronger than the court. And Clorinde represents the court in that manner. And that, as a way of looking at it, makes a lot more sense to me, because it isn't like this weird comparison thing. But, I don't know, it's not that big a deal. We see the exact kind of scenario that she was just describing, with someone saying they vehemently oppose the law, refuse to stand trial, and request an alternative recourse to defend the honor of his guilt. This is someone who is essentially disregarding the law and saying, this is bullshit, let me fight for my honor. And all his bluster and confidence there is just overinflated ego, obviously, based on what we see in a moment here, as Clorinde comes out to defend the honor of the court against someone who would denigrate the law. And this guy is just a fucking idiot. He immediately is terrified. But then we return to the comparison from the beginning, once again mentioning the idea of a safety on a musket, saying too often it is only when the safety is disengaged and the champion duelist takes aim that they finally realize whose hand controls the gun. Whose hand controls the gun. You know, this doesn't really work for me, but I still like this teaser quite a bit, but this comparison or analogy doesn't really line up to me, in the sense that it sort of mixes its metaphors a little bit, I feel, by the end here. And what I mean by that is, in the beginning, it was saying that the champion duelist is like the safety on a musket, saying that Clorinde is the safety itself. But then here, she's saying that when that safety is disengaged, and the champion duelist takes aim, which then suddenly is implying that she isn't the safety, she's the person holding the gun, which, I mean, I guess that lands into the thing of her saying it's only then when people finally realize whose hand controls the gun, which is her, but, I don't know, it sort of is conflicting with itself in my mind. And I'd love to be proven wrong here. Like I said, leave in the comments if you think I'm wrong and why, but, I don't know, I just can't figure it out in a way that feels right to me. So, you know. Either way, though, I like how this ends with Neuvillette being just sort of disappointed in this guy, sighing and saying the request for a duel is approved, and the decision is irreversible. You ain't getting out of this one. So yeah, I like it. I think it's fun, but its core analogy comparison point just doesn't work for me for whatever reason. I can't figure out the logic within it. So with that, I'm gonna move on to the next one. Now we have Sigewinne's character teaser, Everyday Correspondence. Once again, I've already done a video on this one. Check that out if you want my more full thoughts on it. Let's get into it. I like how we start with Neuvillette, as he is reading the letter that is the framing device of this entire teaser.
Dear Monsieur Neuvillette, how are you? I haven't written in a while, so I thought I'd send you an update.
Sigewinne.
I also like that with the name Everyday Correspondence, it's implied that this is the kind of thing that they do a lot. They send letters to each other.
You're always asking after me. Please, don't worry. Everyone at the Fortress of Meripede is really nice to me.
I love the immediate contradiction.
What even is this? It's completely inedible.
Suck it up and eat it.
The food here is delicious, and the people are super friendly.
The entire contradiction throughout this of a lot of things is just real fun to me.
Come by to visit me sometimes. They're always full of praise for the fortress, and they get along great with everyone here. Sneaky sticker for you. This one's really cute. Let's give it to a cute person. You once said we have to discover the meaning of life for ourselves. I think you're completely right. Life at the fortress is often pretty uneventful, so my
This is all so
empty a lot
goofy,
of
but
the
in like
time.
the best way.
He's down! Ha! Too easy.
But everyone trusts me, which is really great. I really like being a head nurse. Anyway,
I like how
Duke and I are planning on
the
taking
more
a trip
playful
out,
side
so
of
we'll
things
definitely
falls
see you
away
soon.
one step at another until we're to this just real scenario part. And then we return to him reading the letter.
I look forward to it.
And once again, we get his just appreciation of Melusines, as by the time the letter has arrived and he's read it, they're already here.
We're here.
Real cute, real fun. I don't have too much to say about it that is distinct from what I did in my video, so if you want my more thorough thoughts, check that out, like I said earlier. But I will admit, something I find funny is if he's only getting to reading the letter now, right before Sigewinne arrives, that really can only mean a few things. One is that the mailing system is abysmal and it took super long for the letter to get to him, to the point that by the time he was reading it, she's already here. Another option is that he's just so busy, he has so many things that he has to be doing, that he only got around to reading the letter now, by the time that she's already about to arrive. And the final option is Sigewinne doesn't understand how to use letters much, and just sent a letter on the same day that she was gonna go up to meet him, which is very funny to me. I don't think that's what it is, because she feels smarter than that, but the Melusines are goofy, so I don't know, maybe. That's just a fun little thing I wanted to point out. Yeah, I don't think I have really anything else I want to acknowledge that I didn't also already say in my original video, so yeah, I'll leave it there. Much briefer than the Clorinde one, but that one I felt that I had some more things to say about how I feel on it than I originally did, where with this one, I feel about the same way about it. It's fun, it's cute, I like it, it gives some fun insights to character, but in sort of simple ways, and I feel like I covered it pretty well in my original video. So, with that, gonna move on to the last one. Here we have Emilie's character teaser, Testimony. Like Sigewinne's teaser, I don't think I'll have too much extra to say about this one, but we'll see what I have to say. So let's get into it.
A perfume can tell you a lot about the person wearing it. Mint and fruity aromas express a yearning for youthful vigor, while notes of cedar and amber show a desire to appear mature. And though a fragrance fades with dilution, evaporation, and aging, so long as you filter out the impurities to remove interference, the perfume will still tell its story.
I like the through line of perfumes telling a story.
The top note is citrus and tea leaves, with neroli and roses coming through in the middle note, and a grounded, woody base note. A very heavy fragrance with great longevity, rather on the expensive side. Rest in peace.
I really like how it
can tell you a
transitions to
Even when
this,
the wearer
a
can
dead
no
body
longer
on
speak for
a
themselves.
operating table, basically.
We'd arranged to go camping up on the summit. But when I got up there, I couldn't find her. She must have slipped and fallen.
That's her friend's statement. What do you make of it?
I had picked up on my
It's
first
unusual
watching
to
of
meet at the
this
summit,
that in the
especially for
subtitles,
someone who's never been mountain climbing
Trevor says
before.
friend
The claim that
with
she fell is a
quotations.
lie.
I can hear it in her voice,
Why so
though, on
sure?
listening.
There was no sweat among the impurities present, and no lady in their right mind would apply such a heavy fragrance before a climb.
Yeah. So, gonna just touch on a few things, but not too much. So initially here she's talking about how the various fragrances and impurities within the smell of a perfume can tell a story about the person wearing it, which moves into her describing a specific perfume, which we have the aspects of appearing visually in front of us until we get to the end of it, where we have the hand of what I imagine is the dead woman who this was presumably the perfume of, which was a heavy fragrance with great longevity, which was rather on the expensive side. We then move on to her just acknowledging the fact that a perfume can be an important thing to learn about a person after they've died, as they can't speak for themselves. And we move into, from there, the sort of mystery involved in this, of what exactly happened, why she died. And this friend here, quote unquote, is crying supposedly and claims that they were hiking up a mountain to do some camping or whatever, and she fell and died. But immediately, something that I hadn't picked up on in my first watch through in my original video is that Chevreuse is immediately doubting this friend in what she is saying, which I hadn't fully picked up on. And very quickly, Emilie is able to give some similar assessment. And though Chevreuse questions the reasoning that Emilie has, like asking for more information, with that it's clear that she's just wanting the thought process so she understands what Emilie is saying so that she doesn't jump to any conclusions, rather than doubting the conclusion that Emilie came to. Now, of course, Emilie is still just working off of pure speculation, essentially, but she does have some good points that work as a good jumping off point for an investigation. Most notably being, there was no sweat among the impurities present. That would not be the case if this person had hiked up a mountain and then fallen to their death, which means, much more likely, that they were killed and then their body was planted and that kind of thing, and this fake story was developed by the friend. The exact details obviously can't be figured out just from this, but it's clearly more than it seems, and she picks up on that, and Chevreuse is gonna look into it, presumably. So I really like this one. It does some interesting stuff with showing the more analytical side of Emilie and her more forensic side, which I think is really cool. But with that, anything else I have to say about this teaser, I believe I said in my original video about it, so feel free to check that out. And with that, we have reached the final teaser. At least that is out currently until Natlan releases a teaser. Let's face it, one might come out like tonight or something before I'm finished with this video, so we'll see. Either way though, having finished out all of these teasers, I hope you enjoyed the video. Feel free to like and subscribe if you did, and leave comments if you want on my thoughts on what you think of the teasers yourself, anything you want. And with that, I hope you all have a great day. Goodbye.